The day the sky turned dark was a Tuesday. Susan Wright was drinking her morning coffee when the emergency alert system blared through her phone, computer, and the military base speakers all at once. As commander of the Global Defense Forces, North American Division, she had trained for many scenarios, but nothing like this. "Commander, you need to see this," said Officer Andy Miller, his face pale as he burst into her office without knocking. Susan rushed to the command center where dozens of personnel stared at the main screen in stunned silence. 17 massive ships blocked the sunlight over major cities across the globe. Each vessel stretched nearly 17 kilometers from end to end, dwarfing anything humans had ever built. "How did they get so close without detection?" Susan asked, her voice steady despite the hammering in her chest. "Unknown, Commander. They simply appeared. All at once across the globe," replied Communications Officer Ellen Diaz. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies. The message is repeating." Susan nodded. "Play it." A deep rumbling voice filled the room. The English was perfect but had an unsettling quality, as if spoken through grinding rocks. "People of Earth, we are the Draconian Collective. Your planet has resources we require. You have 72 hours to surrender control. Resistance will result in your extinction. This is not negotiable." The message repeated in multiple languages. "Get me the president," Susan ordered, already calculating how little time they had. "And find Dr. Alan Barnes immediately." Across the country at Stanford University, Dr. Alan Barnes was already watching the same ships through the observatory telescope. As the leading expert in theoretical physics and energy systems, he noticed something unusual about the vessels. "Look at these readings," he told his assistant. "The energy signature around their hulls. It's fluctuating in a regular pattern." His phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he hadn't seen in years. "Alan, it's Greg Lewis." "Major Lewis now, I hear," Alan replied, recognizing his old college roommate's voice. "I assume you're calling about our visitors? The president is gathering everyone who might help. We need you in Washington. A plane is already on its way to pick you up." Alan looked back at his readings. "Greg, these ships, there's something strange about their energy field. I need more data. You'll get it, just get on that plane." In Washington, the crisis room was filled with generals, scientists, and government officials all talking over each other. President Howard tried to maintain order, but fear was taking hold. "What military options do we have?" asked Secretary of Defense Patricia Weiss. General Scott shook his head. "Our most advanced weapons might as well be slingshots against those ships. We've never seen technology like this." The door opened and Dr. Barnes entered, escorted by Major Greg Lewis. Greg had changed since their college days. More muscular, crew-cut, the confidence of a career military officer, but he still had the same determined look Alan remembered. "Dr. Barnes, thank you for coming," said the president. "We need options." "Mr. President, I've been studying the ship's energy readings," Alan said, connecting his laptop to the main screen. "They're putting out massive amounts of radiation, but in patterns I've never seen before. The strongest bursts happen when they communicate with each other." "How does that help us?" asked Secretary Weiss. "I don't know yet," Alan admitted, "but understanding their technology might reveal vulnerabilities." While the meeting continued, Lieutenant Kate Miller was summoned to a separate facility. As the military's top linguist with specialties in pattern recognition and nonverbal communication, Kate had helped negotiate with hostile groups worldwide, but never aliens. "Lieutenant Miller," General Scott greeted her. "The Draconians have requested a face-to-face meeting. They're sending down what they call an ambassador. You'll be part of our team." Kate's stomach tightened. "What do we know about them?" "Almost nothing. That's why you're here. You read people better than anyone. We need to know what we're dealing with." 3 hours later, Kate stood in a heavily guarded conference room as the Draconian ambassador arrived. Ambassador Sith was tall, nearly 7 feet, with scaled skin in shades of deep green and bronze. His yellow eyes had vertical pupils, and a ridge of spines ran from his head down his back. He wore what appeared to be a ceremonial armor of black material, unlike any metal Kate had seen. While the senior officials made introductions, Kate observed, the Draconian's movements were fluid, but tense. His eyes darted around the room, assessing threats. His clawed hands opened and closed rhythmically. He's nervous, Kate realized with surprise. Why would a representative of such an advanced race be nervous? We have come to collect your surrender, Scythe announced. Your planet's resources will serve the collective. What specific resources do you need? Asked the Secretary of State. Perhaps we can negotiate an arrangement that doesn't involve surrender. Negotiation is not an option, Scythe replied. But Kate noticed a slight flicker in his eyes, a momentary break in his confident posture. He's lying, she thought, or at least not telling the whole truth. Meanwhile, in a hastily prepared lab beneath the Pentagon, Alan and Greg worked with the limited data available. A young engineer named Olivia Jackson joined them, bringing expertise in communications technology. If they're using radiation pulses to communicate, Olivia suggested, maybe we could disrupt it somehow. Alan nodded. Like jamming a radio signal, but far more complex. We need more data, Greg said, frustrated. We can't develop countermeasures based on guesswork. At that moment, Kate was making her own discovery. As the diplomatic meeting ended, she pulled General Scott aside. Sir, something's not right. The ambassador is hiding something. When Secretary Morris mentioned their technology, the ambassador showed physical signs of anxiety. You think their tech has weaknesses? I think there's more to this invasion than they're telling us. And I think Ambassador Scythe knows it. As night fell on the first day, Susan Wright stood on the roof of the Pentagon looking up at the massive shadow blocking the stars. The clock was ticking. 48 hours remained before the deadline. Her secure phone buzzed. It was Dr. Barnes. Commander, we need better readings from those ships. As close as possible. Susan made a quick decision. I'll get you what you need, but you better make it count. As she ended the call, a junior officer approached. Commander, we're receiving reports of strange behavior from some of the smaller Draconian vessels. They appear to be arguing with each other. Susan's eyes narrowed. Show me everything. And get Lieutenant Miller up here now. The massive ships continued to hover silently above Earth's cities. But perhaps, Susan thought, they weren't as united as they wanted humans to believe. And in that division, Earth might find its only hope for survival. The clock showed 24 hours remaining. In the underground lab, Dr. Alan Barnes wiped sweat from his forehead as he made final adjustments to the prototype device. It was roughly the size of a microwave oven, with numerous antenna-like projections and a control panel that glowed with soft blue light. Will it work? Asked Commander Susan Wright, who had barely slept in the past 2 days. Alan exchanged glances with Olivia Jackson and Major Greg Lewis before answering. In theory, yes. The lab tests show it can generate the exact frequency pattern we detected in their communications, but testing it on an actual Draconian ship is another matter entirely. What's the effective range? Susan asked. Olivia stepped forward. About 2 kilometers. We'd need to get close to one of their vessels. Too close, Greg muttered. Susan straightened, her uniform. Then we'll need a volunteer team to deliver it, small, fast, and skilled. I'll lead it, said a voice from the doorway. Captain Peter Johnson stood there, his flight suit already on. As the top pilot in the Space Command, he had more experience in orbital maneuvers than anyone else on base. You'll need more than just flying skills, Susan said. This mission needs someone who can operate complex equipment under pressure and evade detection. That's why I brought Lisa Chen, Peter replied as a young woman in a similar flight suit stepped up beside him. Best navigator in the program, and she's got a degree in electrical engineering. Susan nodded. You launch in 3 hours, get whatever you need. While the mission team prepared, Lieutenant Kate Miller and Diplomatic Officer Sam Rodriguez met, in secret with a Draconian who had reached out through encrypted channels. They gathered in an abandoned warehouse outside the city, heavily guarded by Special Forces soldiers who remained hidden in the shadows. The Draconian who entered was smaller than Ambassador Seath, with scales of a lighter green and fewer spine ridges. He wore no armor, only a simple gray bodysuit with strange symbols. "I am Technician Vez," he said, his voice less gravelly than the ambassador's. "What I tell you will get me executed if discovered." "We appreciate the risk you're taking," Sam said carefully. "Why are you helping us?" Vez's vertical pupils dilated in the dim light. "Not all Draconians support this invasion. Some of us believe there are better ways." "What is the real reason your fleet came to Earth?" Kate asked, watching his body language closely. Vez's tail twitched. A sign Kate had learned indicated stress. "Our home system is dying. The central star has become unstable. We've been searching for a new home for generations." "Why not just ask for help?" Sam demanded. "The military council that rules our fleet believes showing weakness invites destruction. They've encountered other species before. It did not end peacefully." Vez lowered his voice. "But our life support systems are failing. Nearly 30% of our young have died in the past cycle due to resource shortages." Kate leaned forward. "Is there a specific frequency your systems are vulnerable to? Something that might disable rather than destroy?" Vez hesitated, then reached into his bodysuit and pulled out a small crystal-like device. "This contains technical specifications for our main systems. The communication network is particularly sensitive to disruption." As Kate and Sam rushed the information back to the lab, Captain Peter Johnson and Lisa Chen prepared for launch. Their small shuttle had been modified to reduce its radar signature, and the disruptor device was secured in a special compartment. "If we're detected, we'll have about 90 seconds before they can target us," Lisa said, reviewing the calculations on her tablet. Peter nodded grimly. "Then we better not get detected." The shuttle launched under cover of darkness, accelerating quickly to reach orbital altitude. Below them, the lights of cities gleamed, while above, the massive Draconian ships blocked out the stars like artificial moons. "Approaching target range," Lisa whispered, though there was no need to be quiet in space. "The nearest scout vessel is 2.3 kilometers ahead." Peter maneuvered carefully, using minimal thrusters to avoid detection. "Ready the device." Suddenly, alarm lights flashed across their control panel. "They've spotted us," Lisa cried. "Hang on." Peter banked the shuttle hard, diving toward Earth to gain speed, then arcing up behind the moon. "We need cover." Lisa's fingers flew over her controls. "The moon's shadow. If we position ourselves right, their sensors might lose us temporarily." It was a desperate move, but it worked. Using the moon's shadow as cover, they approached the Draconian scout ship from below, now less than 2 kilometers away. "Activating the disruptor," Lisa said, flipping switches on the device. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the Draconian vessel's external lights flickered. Its position shifted slightly as if it had lost stabilization. "It's working," Peter exclaimed. "Get all the readings you can." Lisa connected their sensors to record every detail of the ship's reaction. "The effect is stronger than we expected. It's not just disrupting communications, it's affecting their power systems, too." In the Draconian fleet's command ship, alarms blared. Ambassador Scythe stood beside Fleet Commander Drax as officers rushed to identify the problem. "Scout Vessel 7 has lost communication and shows power fluctuations," reported a technician. "Destroy the human vessel," Commander Drax ordered. Scythe's tail twitched nervously. "Perhaps we should capture it instead. Learn how they've developed this technology so quickly." "No witnesses," Drax growled. "Fire when ready." But the weapon systems came online too late. Peter had already turned the shuttle into a steep dive, using Earth's gravity to accelerate them beyond the range of the Draconian weapons. The shuttle's heat shield glowed orange as they re-entered the atmosphere at dangerous speed. "We got what we needed," Lisa said, clutching the data storage unit. "If we survive this landing, Earth has a chance." Back at the command center, Commander Susan received word of the shuttle's successful return. Dr. Barnes, Olivia, and Greg were already reviewing the data when Susan arrived. "The device worked better than expected," Alan explained excitedly. "It not only disrupted their communications but affected their power systems too. With Technician Vez's information, We can enhance the effect. How quickly can you scale this up? Susan asked. Olivia looked up from her calculations. With global cooperation, we could deploy a network of satellites carrying larger versions of the disruptor within 18 hours. That's cutting it close to their deadline, Greg noted. Susan nodded firmly. Then we better get started. And we need a backup plan. Lieutenant Miller joined them, her expression thoughtful. I think I have one. The Draconians aren't here to conquer us. They're desperate refugees. Their life support systems are failing. What if instead of just defending ourselves, we offer them an alternative? The room fell silent as the implications sank in. You want us to help the aliens that just threatened to exterminate us? One of the generals asked incredulously. I want us to show them there's a solution that doesn't require either of our species to die, Kate replied. What makes humans different is our capacity to turn enemies into allies. Susan looked at the countdown clock. 17 hours remaining. Develop both plans. We'll disable their fleet first, then negotiate from a position of strength. As the EE team dispersed to their tasks, the massive Draconian ships continued their silent vigil in Earth's orbit, unaware that their greatest threat wasn't human weapons, but human ingenuity. The second day of the Draconian arrival brought no relief. Panic spread across cities worldwide as people looked up at the massive ships blocking the sun. Some fled to the countryside while others gathered in churches, mosques, and temples. Many simply huddled with loved ones, waiting. In the underground bunker that now served as Dr. Alan Barnes's laboratory, tension filled the air. Alan had been working for nearly 20 hours straight, his eyes red-rimmed as he studied the data from the Draconian ships. Look at this pattern, he said to Major Greg Lewis, pointing at his computer screen. When their ships communicate with each other, they emit this specific radiation signature. It pulses at regular intervals. Greg leaned closer. Can we use that somehow? Maybe, Alan replied. But I need more expertise. Someone who understands communication technology better than I do. Greg made a call. An hour later, Olivia Jackson arrived at the bunker. In her early 30s, with curly hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, Olivia had built communication systems for the military that even Alan found impressive. So we're dealing with aliens, she said matter-of-factly after reviewing the data. And they might have a weakness in their communication network. That's our theory, Alan confirmed. If we could disrupt how their ships talk to each other, we might buy ourselves some time, Olivia finished. She pulled out a small device from her bag and began connecting it to Alan's computer. Let's get to work. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Kate Miller stood before Commander Susan Wright making an unusual request. I need to speak with the Draconian ambassador again, Kate said firmly. Susan frowned. The diplomatic team already tried. The ambassador refused. Further meetings until we deliver our surrender. Not an official meeting, Kate explained. Something less formal. I noticed things during our first encounter. Physical tells in his behavior. I think there's more going on than they're telling us. Susan considered this. Earth had little to lose at this point. What's your plan? I'll request a meeting under the pretense of discussing surrender terms. During that conversation, I can probe for more information. 4 hours later, Kate found herself face-to-face with Ambassador Scythe again. They met in a neutral location, a hotel conference room stripped of all but 2 chairs and a table. Your leaders are wise to begin surrender discussions, Scythe said, his scaled face difficult for Kate to read. It will save many human lives. Kate nodded, appearing submissive while carefully observing his movements. We have many questions about what surrender means. For instance, how will Earth's resources be harvested? What technology will you use? The question seemed innocent, but Kate noticed an immediate change in Scythe's posture, a stiffening of his spine ridges and a flicker of his inner eyelid. Our methods are not your concern, he replied too quickly. Kate pressed gently. Some of our scientists have concerns about radiation from your ships. They've detected unusual patterns that might harm humans over time. This time, Scythe's reaction was even more pronounced. His clawed hand twitched and his breathing quickened slightly. "The radiation is harmless to biological life," he said, but Kate could tell he was surprised by the human's ability to detect it. She continued the conversation, carefully extracting bits of information while appearing to discuss surrender details. When the meeting ended, Kate immediately reported to Commander Wright. "Their technology relies on a specific type of radiation for both communication and power regulation," she explained. "And when I mentioned it, the ambassador showed clear signs of concern. So they might be vulnerable there," Susan concluded. "There's more," Kate added. "When discussing their biological needs, I noticed physical reactions suggesting they have a unique sensitivity to certain electromagnetic frequencies. It might be related to their physiology." Across the city, an unexpected development was unfolding. Frank Martinez, a civilian radio operator and hobbyist, had been scanning frequencies since the aliens arrived. Using equipment he'd built himself, Frank detected strange signals between the Draconian ships. Unable to understand the alien language, Frank focused on patterns. After 36 hours of recording and analyzing, he noticed something odd. The signals contained repeating segments that seemed to indicate disagreement, different frequencies interrupting each other in what might be arguments. Frank contacted the military hotline that had been established for tips. Within an hour, he was brought to the Pentagon to meet with Commander Wright. "I don't understand what they're saying," Frank explained, playing his recordings. "But see these interruption patterns? In human communications, these typically indicate conflict or disagreement." Susan had communication experts verify Frank's findings. They confirmed his theory. The Draconian fleet wasn't operating with perfect unity. Some ships were sending signals that others immediately overrode or contradicted. "There seems to be a countdown in their communications too," Frank added. "Something repeated and decreasing. It's not synchronized with their ultimatum to us." "What do you mean?" Susan asked. "Their deadline for our surrender is still about 40 hours away, but this countdown in their internal communications will reach zero in approximately 58 hours. Susan immediately connected this information with Dr. Barnes's team. Over secure video link, Alan, Greg, and Olivia reviewed the new data. "This changes everything," Alan said. "If they have their own deadline pressing them, they're not as in control as they want us to believe. And look at these power fluctuations when the arguments occur," Olivia pointed out. "It's as if their disagreements actually affect their ship's energy stability." "We need to build on this," Greg insisted. "If we could create a device that mimics and amplifies these disruptive patterns," Olivia's eyes lit up, "we could potentially interfere with their entire command structure." The team worked through the night, developing a prototype device that could generate the same radiation patterns at higher intensity. By morning, they had a rough design that might work if they could get close enough to a Draconian ship to test it. As the third day began, with just 40 hours remaining before the aliens' deadline, Commander Susan Wright reported their progress to the President and world leaders on a secure call. "We have a potential vulnerability to exploit and a prototype device that might disrupt their systems," she explained. "But we need to test it on an actual Draconian ship." "How do you propose to do that?" President Howard asked. "A small team in our fastest shuttle could get close enough if we time it right," Susan replied. "It's high risk, but it's our best option." "What about negotiation?" asked the Secretary of State. "Lieutenant Miller believes there may be divisions we could exploit diplomatically." "We pursue both approaches," Susan said firmly. "We prepare our device while continuing diplomatic efforts. Lieutenant Miller's insights have been invaluable." As the call ended, Susan stared at the countdown clock on her screen. Time was running out, but for the first time since the massive ships appeared, she felt a small flicker of hope. The Draconians weren't invincible after all. They had weaknesses, divisions, and apparently a deadline of their own. "We might just have a chance," she whispered to herself. "A small one, but a chance." The data from Captain Peter Johnson and Lisa Chen's mission changed everything. With less than 16 hours remaining before the Draconian deadline, the underground bunker buzzed with activity. World leaders had agreed to a desperate plan: pooling, resources and expertise from every nation. Dr. Alan Barnes hadn't slept in over 30 hours, but adrenaline kept him alert as he adapted the disruptor design based on the new information. The effect was stronger than we predicted, he told Commander Susan Wright as she entered the lab. Their power systems and their communications network are linked more closely than we thought. Can we use that? Susan asked. Olivia Jackson nodded, excitedly, her fingers tapping rapidly on her keyboard. We're modifying the design to target both systems simultaneously. If we can deploy a network of these devices in orbit, we might be able to disable their entire fleet at once. Major Greg Lewis studied a global map showing launch sites where different countries were preparing to send the disruptors into space. Russia is ready to launch, China too. Europe, Japan, and India will be ready in 3 hours. Brazil needs 5. What about the diplomatic package? Susan asked, turning to Lieutenant Kate Miller. Kate and Sam Rodriguez had been working with experts to develop an alternative solution to present to the Draconians. Using the information from Technician, Vez, they had compiled a proposal that might appeal to the more moderate factions within the alien fleet. It's ready, Kate replied. We're proposing that instead of conquering Earth, they work with us to colonize Mars and the asteroid belt. Earth would provide technological assistance and temporary resources until they're established. Will they go for it? Greg asked skeptically. They might, Sam said. According to Vez, many Draconians are uncomfortable with the invasion plan. They're desperate because their life support systems are failing, but they don't all agree with their military leadership's approach. Susan studied the proposal. It's worth trying, but first we need to show them we're not helpless. Proceed with the disruptor network deployment. Across the globe, rockets launched into space carrying the disruptor devices. Each nation had contributed their best launch vehicles and personnel. Scientists and engineers from countries that were enemies just days before now worked side by side, united by the common threat. In orbit, small teams of astronauts positioned the devices in a carefully planned network that would cover the entire Draconian fleet. Each disruptor was programmed to activate simultaneously when the command was given. Meanwhile, aboard the Draconian flagship, a power struggle was reaching its peak. Sub-Commander Kraz had gathered support from officers who believed the invasion plan was flawed. Our survival does not require human extinction, Kraz argued in a heated meeting with Fleet Commander Drax and other high-ranking officers. Their technology is primitive in many ways, but they show remarkable adaptability. They could be valuable allies rather than conquered subjects. Commander Drax slammed his clawed fist on the table. Allies? They would betray us the moment they could. No, the Military Council's decision is final. We take this planet by force. Our life support systems will fail completely within 60 hours, Kraz countered. We don't have time for a prolonged conflict, and the humans have already demonstrated they can affect our systems. A minor disruption to one scout ship, Drax dismissed. Nothing more. Ambassador Scythe, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. I have studied these humans closely. They are resourceful beyond what our initial scans suggested. Commander Drax, I believe Sub-Commander Kraz's concerns merit consideration. Drax's eyes narrowed with suspicion. You too, Scythe? Perhaps you've spent too much time among the humans. As the argument continued, none of them noticed a junior communications officer quietly leaving the room. The officer made his way to a secure terminal and sent an encrypted message to Technician Vez on the surface. On Earth, with just 4 hours remaining before the Draconian deadline, final preparations were underway. The last of the disruptor devices had been positioned in orbit, and Commander Susan Wright gathered her team for a final briefing. Once we activate the network, we'll have a small window of opportunity, she explained. Their systems will be temporarily disabled, creating confusion and possibly turning their internal power struggle to our advantage. That's when we make contact with Sub-Commander Kraz, Kate added. Vez has provided a secure communication frequency. What if it doesn't work? Asked one of the generals. What's our backup plan? Susan's expression hardened. There is no backup plan. Either we turn this situation around, or humanity faces extinction. As the deadline approached, tension mounted. Worldwide. Cities beneath the Draconian ships were mostly evacuated, with only military and essential personnel remaining. Billions watched the skies and their screens, waiting to see if humanity would survive the day. In the command center, Susan gave the order. Activate the disruptor network. All around the Earth, the devices powered up simultaneously, flooding space with the precise radiation pattern that targeted Draconian systems. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The massive ships visibly shuddered. Lights flickered across their hulls, and smaller vessels drifted out of formation. On the main screen, Susan and her team watched as the perfectly organized fleet fell into disarray. "It's working," Greg exclaimed. "Their power systems are fluctuating wildly." Kate rushed to a communications console. "This is our chance." Sending transmission to Subcommander Kraz now. Aboard the Draconian flagship, chaos reigned. Emergency alarms blared as systems failed throughout the vessel. Commander Drax shouted orders that couldn't be carried out as communication networks collapsed. "This is sabotage," he roared, turning to Kraz and Scythe. "You have betrayed the collective." Kraz stood tall, no longer hiding his opposition. "No, Commander. I am saving it. This invasion was doomed from the start." Treason. Drax reached for his weapon. But before he could fire, Ambassador Scythe moved with surprising speed, knocking the commander unconscious with a powerful blow. "Now, Sub-Commander," Scythe said calmly. Kraz nodded and took command of the bridge. "Secure the military council members, then restore emergency power to communication systems only." As order was slowly restored aboard the flagship, a message came through on the secure frequency Vez had provided. It was Lieutenant Kate Miller. "Sub-Commander Kraz, this is Earth. We have disabled your fleet temporarily to demonstrate our capabilities, but we don't wish to destroy you. We have a proposal, one that might save both our peoples." Kraz looked around at his fellow officers, most of whom nodded in agreement. "We are listening, Earth." Back in the command center, Susan watched as Kate presented their proposal. The plan to help the Draconians establish colonies on Mars and in the asteroid belt would require tremendous resources and cooperation, but it was better than the alternative. The transmission ended, Susan turned to her team. "Keep the disruptor network active but reduce the intensity. Let's give them time to consider our offer." Alan, who had finally allowed himself to sit down, looked up with exhausted but hopeful eyes. "Do you think they'll accept?" Susan watched. The main screen where the Draconian ships hung motionless in orbit, their once threatening presence now somehow changed. "They don't have much choice. Neither do we. But sometimes, necessity creates the strangest alliances." Around the world, people remained glued to their screens and radios, not yet knowing that the first steps toward an unprecedented future had already been taken. A future where humans and Draconians might work together to survive. The massive ships still loomed overhead, but their meaning had begun to transform from threat to possibility. 1 year passed since the day the Draconian fleet darkened Earth's skies. The massive ships still hung in orbit, but they no longer inspired fear. Instead, they had become a symbol of the most unexpected alliance in human history. Lieutenant Kate Miller, now Earth's official ambassador to the Draconians, stood by a large window on the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital station. The station had been built connecting 3 Draconian vessels and served as the headquarters for the Joint Human-Draconian Cooperation Initiative. "Still hard to believe sometimes, isn't it?" asked Dr. Alan Barnes, joining her at the window. His work on the disruptor technology had earned him global recognition, but he seemed most proud of how they had converted that technology for peaceful purposes. That instead of fighting a war, we're building a future together? Kate smiled. Every day, below them, Earth was partly in shadow, while above and around them, the Draconian fleet had been repurposed. Some ships now served as living quarters for Draconian families. Others had been converted into research stations, manufacturing facilities, or launch platforms for missions to Mars and the asteroid belt. The first Draconian colony on Mars is nearly self-sufficient, Alan said, checking his tablet. Olivia says the environmental systems are functioning at 97% capacity. Better than we expected. Olivia Jackson had led the team adapting Earth's technology to help create habitable environments for the Draconians. Her engineering skills had proven invaluable in solving the life support problems that had driven the Draconians to desperation in the first place. And the asteroid mining operation? Kate asked. Ahead of schedule, Captain Johnson and Lisa Chen's team has already extracted enough rare minerals to supply both our needs for the next decade. Alan grinned. Their Draconian crew members have apparently become quite fond of human music. Peter says they've been teaching the Draconians to dance. The thought of the reptilian aliens learning to dance made Kate laugh. A year ago, such an image would have seemed impossible. Now, it was just another example of how two vastly different species could find common ground. A door slid open, and Sub-Commander Kraz, now holding the title of Cooperation Director, entered the observation deck. In the past year, Kate had learned to read Draconian expressions better. The slight raising of his spine ridges indicated he was pleased. Ambassador Miller, Dr. Barnes, Kraz greeted them. The council is ready to begin the ceremony. They followed, Kraz to the central chamber of the station where representatives from Earth and the Draconian fleet had gathered. Commander Susan Wright stood with military leaders from nations around the world. Beside them were scientists, engineers, and diplomats who had worked tirelessly to transform a potential extinction event into humanity's greatest leap forward. On the Draconian side, Ambassador Scythe stood with various ship captains and specialists. The former fleet commander Drax was notably absent. He remained in detention along with the hardliners who had refused to accept the new alliance. President Howard stepped forward to address the assembly. 1 year ago today we faced what seemed like the end of human civilization. Instead, we found ourselves at the beginning of a new chapter. Today, we formalize what we have already proven, that our species can accomplish more together than we ever could apart. Director Kraz stepped forward next. My people came to Earth as desperate refugees, though our leaders chose the path of conquest rather than cooperation. In our darkest hour, when our life support systems were failing and our young were dying, humanity showed us another way. Today, we honor that choice. Together they signed the official treaty. 12 copies were prepared, 1 for each major region of Earth and 1 for each ship in the Draconian fleet. As the signing concluded, applause filled the chamber. Later, that evening, a smaller celebration took place in what had become known as the Integration Lounge, a room designed with environmental controls that allowed both species to mingle comfortably. Kate watched as humans and Draconians shared food, drinks, and conversation. Major Greg Lewis approached her carrying 2 glasses. Hard to believe this is the same Greg who was ready to fight to the death a year ago, Kate thought. To unexpected outcomes, Greg said, handing her a glass. And to people who can adapt to them, Kate replied. Across the room, Technician Vez was explaining something to Frank Martinez, the civilian radio operator whose discovery of the Draconian communication patterns had played such a crucial role. Frank had since become an expert in Draconian language and communication systems. Have you heard the latest from the joint research team? Greg asked. Kate shook her head. They've managed to adapt our disruptor technology into a new energy production system. It's completely clean and twice as efficient as anything we had before. Alan and Olivia are calling it convergence power, a blend of human and Draconian science. That will help the Mars colony, Kate noted. And Earth, Greg added. Several cities are already planning to convert their power grids. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft chime. The environmental shield at the center of the room deactivated, revealing a large viewport. Outside, a spectacular light show began as Earth entered a meteor shower. The debris burned up in the atmosphere, creating streaks of light visible from the station. Humans and Draconians alike moved toward the viewport to watch the display. Kate noticed how the two species no longer segregated themselves but stood, mixed together, pointing and commenting on particularly bright meteors. Ambassador Scythe joined Kate by the window. On our homeworld, Meteor showers were seen as signs of change, he said quietly. We believed they burned away the old to make room for the new. A fitting symbol for today, Kate replied. Scythe's scales shifted in what Kate now recognized as their equivalent of a thoughtful expression. I must confess, Ambassador Miller, when I first made contact with your diplomatic team, I never imagined this outcome. I simply hoped to minimize casualties on both sides. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones we don't initially see, Kate said from the viewport. Earth glowed blue and green below them, while Mars shone as a distant red dot, the site of the first extraterrestrial Draconian settlement. Between them, the asteroid belt represented a treasure trove of resources that both species were learning to share. None left orbit, Scythe mused, looking at the Draconian ships that now permanently circled Earth. No, Kate agreed, but not for the reasons anyone expected. As the celebration continued around them, Kate thought about how close they had come to mutual destruction. Instead, the Draconian fleet had become a permanent fixture in Earth's orbit, not as conquerors or even guests, but as partners in an interspecies alliance that was already reaching toward the stars. The massive ships that had once brought fear now brought hope. They had arrived as harbingers of humanity's end, but had instead become the foundation for humanity's greatest beginning. The Draconian fleet had landed on Earth, and none had ever left orbit, because they had found something far more valuable than conquest. They had found a home,